Chapter 11 Hunger. Death, the visitor, had stayed long that year and taken many Anishinaabeg to the next world. Those left behind had the task of going on with life even as the harshest snow fell, the bitter cold deepened, the game hid, and the fish sank deeper into the lake. Now, as Omakayas began to gain a little strength, she wished heartily to eat and craved any sort of food at all. But there was only enough cornmeal in the morning for a few mouthfuls of mush, only enough wild rice for a handful each during the day. The family scrounged a potato, sometimes a bit of bannock. No meat once the fish and dried venison from the meat cache were gone. Omakayas was strong enough to bring in wood, though she trembled as she walked. Mamma improved slowly, too. At least she got stronger physically. Her face remained unchanging and sad, and her eyes remained haunted by the sorrow of Niwo's loss. Dede was recovering so slowly that he didn't have the strength to hunt. Though he tried to fish, he hadn't much luck and could not stand the cold for long. He had to borrow against next year's furs. The family ran up a bill at the trader's, bought expensive salt pork. One day he notched his counting stick and spoke to Omakayas. The trader will have all of next year's furs by the time winter is finished, he said, unless some game throws itself at us, or unless I can get him another way. His eyes flashed and the shadow of a grin twisted on his face, the intrigue of an old Dede who'd never been sick. Bring me the chess game, he said to Omakayas. She knew just where it was, that precious set that had belonged to Dede's grandfather, the man who had taught him his Chimokoman game. The chess set was always reverently kept in its own blanket, hidden in a corner of the room with the medicine bags and Dede's ceremonial clothes. Wrapped in red cloth, it was considered something very special. Every few days, Dede took it out to play solitary games and tried to teach the strategies to others. Carefully now, she bore it in her arms to Dede. He took the chess set, and there, before the fire, he arranged the pieces in their special order. The pieces were hand-carved of maple, finely grained. The queen, or Ogima, wore a small pointed hat. Omakayas liked the horse, its neck curved and strong. The pawns were little round-headed people. The bishop looked just like Father Baraga, the priest who walked miles in his snowshoes to baptize, stealing souls from the other mission and also from the Manitos. The little towers at the ends, those that moved so honestly and directly, were Omakayas' favorite pieces. They began to play. Dede usually beat her in short time, but today she managed through desperate measures to think ahead far enough to draw the game out to a phenomenal length. Giget chi woningiz, said Dede approvingly. Good job, my girl. Maybe you should be the one to play the traitor. Dede's compliments were so rare that when he gave them, Omakayas at first didn't absorb what she'd heard. It took until later, lying curled in her blanket for the warmth that his approval gave her, to sink into place around her heart, warming her as she fell into a good sleep. The next day Dede took the chessboard and headed to the trader's to play for supplies. He did not allow his family to come and watch him, for those who gathered were often rough, lay-arounds, drinkers, wintering voyagers who idled their time with gambling and trader's rum. Fishtail and Lapatre were there. However, it was from Lapatre's daughter, Twilight, that the girls heard the details of the game. As Twilight told it, Dede had walked in humbly, played poorly at first, causing the trader to raise the stakes. Then Dede dragged the game out awkwardly until the trader thought he was unbeatable. He was sure that he was going to win and felt confident enough to agree, laughingly, to cancel part of Dede's debt. That was when Dede pounced. In 6 swift moves, Dede finished him off. Dede's triumph resulted in a small square of salt pork, a bit of flour, some dried apples, and a bladder of fish oil. That last item none of the children were happy to see. Dosed every morning with the awful stuff, they were sure to stay healthy now. Dosed every morning. But the price was high. Drinking the oil down gagged Omakayas. Tears came to her eyes, and more than once she wished her father was not quite so good at the game of chess. Old Tallow was sitting by the fire, cleaning and oiling each part of her ancient, frail gun. She usually had more luck with her sharp lance, but claimed that out of hunger her arms were weakening and her aim with the razor-keen instrument was off. Even her snares, set so cleverly just where a rabbit usually wanted to and needed to hop, yielded almost none at all. Rabbits were suddenly dying from a rabbit disease that seemed to eat up their insides. Neshki, old Tallow split a poor Waboos rabbit and opened its skinny body to show that the creature was mush inside, a bloody pudding as the result of disease. Probably a sickness brought by the Chimukawan, too, she growled. Since the death of Niwo, she refused to attempt to speak to anyone who was not Anishinaabe. The traders got her cold eye, the missionaries her hard glare, the few other white visitors who chanced onto the island received from Old Tallow no welcome. She blamed them for the disease. She blamed them for the poor quality of game and the scarcity of food. Naturally, when so many animals were hunted for sale to white traders for fur, there would be fewer left to eat for survival. The only thing wrong with their lives that she could not blame on the Chimukuman was the weather, though she tried. Their loud voices scare off the sun. The sun is afraid of their hairy faces. If the sun is not afraid of your face, said Dede, I'm sure no Chimukuman could make it hide. You are mixed blood, jeered Old Tallow, pleased to be in a mock exchange of insults. Oh, Wisi Kodi Winini, half-burnt wood. Am I speaking to the white half or the Anishinaabe? Go ahead, cut my arm, offered Dede. See if you can divide the white blood from the red blood. Old Tallow looked toward Nokomis for help, but she just raised her eyebrows. Mikwam, if you're so strong, melt away this rice. You're the hot-headed one, said Dede. You melt it. Nobody could, for after a few weeks of kind weather, the earth had frozen with a vengeance, and spring seemed far away. Omakayas was tired of all the different kinds of ice around her. There was just the plain ice, the kind you couldn't see through, that covered the lake and hid the water and the fish below. That was the ice she had to help Nokomis, chopped every day from the deep hole they fished through. The fish were biting, only rarely. They could fish all day and not even come up with a skinny lake trout. The nets they lowered through the ice hole came up frozen solid the moment they reached the surface, of course. Empty ice nets. There was the old ice on the oiled paper window, ice on the inside of the cabin walls on cold mornings, ice on the frozen paths, and ice in the water bucket. Transparent ice, white ice so black and solid you couldn't see through it. If only we could eat ice. If only ice was food, said Pinch. As he said this, into his mind's eye came the picture of the berries he'd stuffed into his mouth last summer. Mamma was right. If only he had them now. All Omakayas was interested in, she thought one evening as she fell asleep, was thin ice. Then no ice, melting ice. She thought that until she had her dream. Nokomis put charcoal on her face one night, sent her to bed with no food, told her to remember her dreams if she should have any. Omakayas knew that Nokomis wanted her to search for and find a spirit helper, someone great in spirit, who would help her to recover her will to live. Omakayas tried to make herself better, to stop dwelling on worthless sadnesses. Omakayas couldn't help it. She didn't care about the world. Still, she did as she was told and went to sleep, determined to remember any dream she might have. No dream. As before in the dead of winter, her dreams were blank. The moon shifted one quarter, then Nokomis tried again. Nothing. At last, when Omakayas had a particularly slow day, Nokomis made sure that she tried to dream yet again. She smoothed the dry powdery black charcoal onto Omakayas' face and sang to her as she fell asleep. That night, Omakayas dreamed. Everything was ice in her dream, and she was sliding on it. Faster, slipperier, she was sliding through the woods and then down to the lake shore. Something drew her onto the icy lake shore, and although she knew the ice covered the rocks, she kept walking, exploring. Before her there was a cave. She entered. Aneen, said a soft voice from deep in the darkness. Aneen, said Omakayas. Where are you? In a glimmer of light, a motherly woman showed herself. She was dressed in the most beautiful furs, and her face was very kind. Her eyes deep, thrilling, wild. Black fur rippled against her dark skin. She opened her mouth. Her teeth were long and sharp, but there was nothing to fear. I'm going to help you, said the woman. I feel sorry for you, and I love you. Just remember to give me tobacco. I'm the bear spirit woman. I knew your great-grandma and great-grandpa. They live with me now. Omakayas woke slowly. It was like floating to the surface of a warm depth of feeling. She wanted to stay in the dream, but in just the same way that she always bobbed to the water's surface in the summer, no matter how hard she tried to sit on the lake bottom, she lost her struggle and knew after a time that she was fully awake. The dream was gone. Later that day, Omakayas told Nokomis about the dream. Immediately, Nokomis took her aside and brought her to the corner of the house near the window of oiled paper. There, sitting across from her, Nokomis smoothed Omakayas' hair to each side with her worn hands and smiled lovingly into her granddaughter's eyes. These bear people want to help you. You must not forget to give your helper tobacco whenever you think of her. She's with you, your lady. She's going to help you. She will be looking out for you in this world. The only good thing about this time of winter was the stories. While the snow and ice still held fast, Nokomis told them tales about the world of Manitus and Wendigos, tales of Nana Bozho, the comical teacher. Those last were her favorites. of the girls. Maybe because she so often felt small and helpless. Omakais thought long about one particular tale Nokomis told. She loved to hear it when the flames jumped and the frozen world outside the small cabin was dark. One night she asked her grandmother to tell it once again. Nokomis, very soon the ice will break and the lake will start moving. The animals will stir and the frogs will wake up. I know there will be no more stories until next winter. So please, the diving muskrat one now? Nokomis nodded, pleased that Omakais asked, for this story was an important teaching story, or Adisokan. While her fingers swiftly flew at her quill work, she told the story of how the earth began.